up as the thesis topic. In terms of my background, my own background, I was originally trained as an engineer and worked as an engineer. One of my earliest stints was in Kurdistan, Iraq, as a very young engineer, long time ago. And then I came to America to study electrical engineering, and then after a year or so, I was at a very good university in New York. I lost interest in engineering because I have seen, not interest in the sense of working as an engineer, but I was interested in the knowledge, how we can transfer that knowledge into sustainability, how to make the world a better place. Engineers had this hubris that they can design and construct the world in the way they want it, and I found out that many times, many of our projects don't work in various parts of the world as the way we were taught. So how can we design technology in an appropriate manner that would be relevant to the particular context, the social historical context? That's what I've been studying. And then I switched from engineering to social sciences, and I got degrees in economic development, science, technology, and values, and science studies is the area of the field that I specialize in. I can teach courses in sociology of science and technology, history of technology, philosophy of science and technology, sustainability, environmental economics, environmental impact assessment. I have taught all these courses in various places. Innovation studies. I just recently resigned from my permanent chair at the University of Oslo in Norway, where I was a professor of science, technology, and innovation for many years. And then I moved to the United Nations, a university in Tokyo. That's where Daryl and I met, and we have been developing interesting programs, and this is one of those projects, AUSN. It's an ambitious project in many ways because of the challenges. Previously, where we worked, we had tremendous amount of resources and backing. Whether we were working for the United Nations University, we had backing of the Japanese government, which gave us tremendous amount of money in terms of resources to develop programs. University of Oslo, Norway is a very rich country. I had no problem finding resources. I worked in Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. I had no problem with money in Singapore. But here, we want to develop this university. We had our choices, but we decided that at this stage of our career, we want to do something different. And it's an idealistic choice in many ways. Work among the indigenous native peoples to help in whatever way we could bring our knowledge and our connections. We don't have the hubris that we can change everything, but at least in a moderate way that we can initiate a dialogue and a conversation and make participation of our native peoples from around the world. And I got interested in this because when I was working for the United Nations University at the Institute of Advanced Studies, we had a program on traditional knowledge. And through the UN, we were able to go around the world and work with communities, native communities, and understand their problems, or how they adapt to the world of coming out of tremendous exploitation and horrible genocide for 500 years or more, and then still they survived despite the millions of people who perished in that process. And much of the knowledge that they had are disappearing for various reasons, because some communities might be very small to sustain such things. So there are a lot of projects going on around the world to digitize such knowledge and also to capture that knowledge. And there are a lot of issues involved in that, how we should do it. But I can't go into that. That might be another talk. So one of the ideas that I have is to develop a master's program in sustainability science here at the university, and this is to complement the programs of sustainability related studies around the world, particularly in the United States, and especially at ASU, the program I know quite well when it was developed, it was proposed, and we've been there. So it is to complement that. There may be some areas where a gap can find. So that's where it is. So what is sustainability? Something that everybody knows something about sustainability. It's a very important topic. because of the tremendous challenges that we are facing as a result of our development challenges, and also on top of that we have the challenges of climate change and biodiversity, loss of biodiversity, and then so on and so forth. So I will start with at the very basic level of explaining what sustainability is. The root word for sustainability is from going to maintain or to endure something, to sustain and to support. So that's where sustainability is. I mean, it comes from that negative connotation. There must be some problem there. Otherwise, we don't have to think about it, right? I mean, everything is enough and plenty, then we don't talk about sustainability. But we don't. We live in limited space in terms of our Earth. Resources, we used to think, economists used to think that we have unlimited resources. If you run out of a resource, we can innovate and find something to replace that. I mean, it would work to some extent, but I don't think it is a process that can go on forever. So we have to change our direction. So it came from biology, the idea of sustainability, sustainable development, how biological systems endure and how they remain productive and be diverse. And so we can learn from that, our natural environment and those people who live very close to that. I will come to that at the latter part of my talk. So the very idea is to sustaining human well-being and survival. That is the idea of sustainability. How to maintain a balanced, good life, and how to maintain that, not only for ourselves, but also for the future generations that will be coming after us. And then came the idea of sustainable development. The idea of sustainable development is not new. Philosophers and thinkers who are far ahead of most of us have been thinking about these issues for a long time. But nobody paid much attention to those thinkers, whether 2,000 years ago or 500 years ago or 200 years ago. These people have been thinking about that, but most recently it has taken up the importance that is due to it, the concept. So the United Nations, rightfully so, as an organization that was set up, the current version of the UN after Second World War, the primary mission is to maintain the peace and to prevent conflict. We came out of the Second World War, one of the worst atrocities that humans could create in this world. Millions of people perished in that, and the UN's mission is to help to prevent such conflicts breaking out, but it has been somewhat successful, but we haven't been successful in terms of eliminating that part of our human history. But the other important mission of the UN is to help nations that were previously colonized, those newly independent nations that were coming out of the colonial nightmare for centuries, and how to help those nations develop in terms of assistance in developing institutions, or helping to develop technology and create an international system whereby they could have a role as equals. But that is not something that has succeeded to a large extent, but it has been, the UN was able to do that to some extent, but given the structure of the UN, we have all kinds of problems there. But one of the missions of the UN is to create an environment, create a system whereby we could discuss and we could create a world to develop sustainable development. So the UN created various commissions. So one of the most important commissions that the UN set up was the 1987 Brundtland Commission. Brundtland was the Prime Minister of Norway, a very distinguished lady who later became the head of the World Health Organization. And she and her commission came up with the definition of sustainable development. Development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the needs of future generations. We have to meet the needs of the present, indeed, because there are billions of people who are still under extreme poverty and deprivation. And also we need to think the future generations. So it includes both intra-generational equity, or intra means within the existing group of people, and also intergenerational equity. That means between generations, present and the future generations. If you have any questions or something like that, you can always stop me, and I will be very happy to answer. You can find various definitions of sustainability. One of the definitions I found was the UCLA's Center on Sustainability. They define sustainability as the physical. This follows the Brundtland Commission's definition. The Brundtland Commission's report is now known as Our Common Future, and it's freely available. You can Google it, and you can find and download a free copy. It is available. So following that definition, the definition that UCLA's committee gave is this: the physical, development, and institutional operating practices that meet the needs of present users without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs, particularly with regard to use and waste of resources. The use and waste of resources. Sustainable practices support ecological, human, and economic health and vitality. So sustainability presumes that resources are finite and should be used conservatively and wisely with a view to long-term priorities and consequences of the ways in which the resources are used. So the key here is to use the use of resources. How we need to think in terms of the consequences of using those resources. We don't have enormous quantities of resources. Even if we use it, we may have other consequences. Fossil fuel burning and so on. So all this problems. So this is a fairly interesting definition. And of course, you can find various other definitions, whether it is Wikipedia or any other sources. You should be able to find very interesting, very useful definitions and explanations of sustainability. So sustainable development, as per the UN definition, they found they said that sustainability has three different, three important pillars. One is society, second one is economy, and the third one is environment. So we need to look at three areas. Economic development. I mean, economic development is very important. That's one of the reasons why our standard of living improved so much more for a lot of people, not everyone, because of economic development. We need that. But we can't grow forever. Growth has problems. So how to grow sustainably is the important part of the economic development issue here. We need also think about social development, apart from sustainable development, with education, health, and gender equality, or equality for all peoples and within the society. So how to balance that, and also between different groups within the community, within society. So social development is also important. Economists don't much care about this, but we need to think about that as well. That's where the questions of equity and also inequality and all sort of things come from. And then environmental protection. That's a very important part. Those are three pillars. The usual way of looking at it is that these are three concentric circles, intersecting circles. But that is problematic. It's not exactly like that. I mean, you can see the various pictures. I can't draw it here, but the concentric circles approach is wrong. But a more nested approach, which means that all these things are not equal: economic development, social development, and environmental protection. Economy should be encircled by society. So economy is part of society. And then the society is within our ecosystem, within our environment. Okay, so we need to get our priorities right. Economic development is part of society, and society is part of nature, of larger ecosystems. So we have to think, when our planetary issues, that planet that our Earth, Mother Earth, is the limit for us. And we can't bridge that. We can't go beyond that. I mean, some scientists others say that in order for us to survive, we need to go out and colonize, the word colonize, other planets for humans to survive, because hey, we messed up this planet and go on and mess up some other planet. It's the wrong way to think about it. We have only this world. We need to make this world livable, and also for coming generations to live a meaningful and happy life. So how we need to think in terms of sustainability, in terms of the limits, our planetary limits. That is the ultimate limit. And then scientists have found out that we are breaching many of those planetary boundaries. Like, for example, our carbon pollution, for example, is causing global warming and various other problems. And also the amount of chemicals that we pump into our environment in various ways, and also chemicals used in agriculture, for example, that causes eutrophication, water runoff into water, and many other problems. And also the excess carbon that is absorbed by oceans, for example, acidification of our water, ocean water. Since the industrial age, it has gone up to about 25% acidity. So that's causing problems for marine life, for example. I mean, this is our chain of being. Once something is affected, it will come back to haunt us. So we have to think about our planetary limits. We have limits within our community, with our country, with our region, and then the planets. That is the right approach to think and act on sustainability. Act locally and think globally. This is one way to look at it, the three-pillar concept of sustainability, the social, environmental, economic. I would like to take a break and show two short videos. Only 2 or 3 minutes long. So.
The link is in the PowerPoint for those on Skype.
It's not
Sure that he leads a sustainable life. He buys organic products at the supermarket, rides to work on a bike, and his lights use green electricity. But is that really sustainable living? Let's go back to the beginning. Even in the 18th century, people were interested in the environment. For example, Carl von Carlowitz realized that you shouldn't cut down more trees than will grow again to replace them. So he had recognized the basic principle of sustainability. Nowadays, sustainability is seen as a global concept. This can be explained with the help of the three-pillar model. The model is based on environmental, economic, and social considerations, which must always be regarded as belonging together. First, the environmental pillar. It includes, among other things, climate protection, which is widespread, protection of resources, and biodiversity. Also, food should be grown organically. That is, we should stop using pesticides. And farm animals should be given fodder produced on the farm. We must use natural resources more sparingly too. One of them is petrol, which we need for our cars. But sooner or later this resource will be exhausted, so there'll be no fuel for the cars. This is why we're looking very hard for an environmentally friendly alternative, so that future generations will have environmentally friendly cars. Electric ones, for example. The next pillar is the economy, that is, business and industry. In future, at the supermarket, Peter should only find produce that's in season in his region, like strawberries in summer. Mangoes from Brazil or bananas from Colombia and Ecuador arrive by air from a very long way away. Transporting them causes a lot of pollution. The third pillar of sustainability is the social element. Goals here include, for example, better education and training opportunities, equal rights for men and women, fighting poverty, and prosperity for the whole of humanity. One beverage manufacturer from an industrialized country has quite a bit of catching up to do here. It repeatedly takes over the wells of villages in India because it needs the water to make its products there. That isn't very sustainable. Peter doesn't think so either. After all, at least a little water should be left in the wells for the Indian population. So Peter tries to do justice to the three-pillar model. When he buys organically grown produce, when he goes to work on his bike, and by using green power from wind turbines, he really does live sustainably. But be careful. A lot of companies exploit consumers' environmental awareness. Not all the products that claim to be from fair trade or organic farming are sustainable. It's up to consumers to be well informed about the products they're consuming.
Okay. One more, I would just a couple of, it's a short one again, 4 minutes I think. It's one from PBS.
In 1915, a Canadian Commission on Conservation made an interesting proclamation. They said, each generation is entitled to the interest on the natural capital, but the principal should be handed on unimpaired. Trees are an example of natural capital. In economic terms, they are the principle you start with. The interest is what you grow from that principle, like other trees. This is called regeneration. Trees creating more trees. But if you cut those trees down, both the principle and the interest will be gone forever. So what is sustainability? That's hard to say, because the meaning has been hijacked. Marketers now use it to sell you sustainable shoes, sustainable soda, and even sustainable toothpaste. Can the word sustainability be saved? Can we take the meaning back? Yes. A dairy farmer takes one of the single largest forms of air pollution, methane from cow waste, and turns it into useful fuel to power farm machinery, reducing his energy costs by 90%. It's the same principle used by 2 Oakland entrepreneurs. They take coffee grounds from their local coffee shops and add mycelium to grow mushrooms. Upcycling allows them to convert waste into something productive. In Alaska, the state's Department of Fish and Game uses principles like maximum sustainable yields to ensure that local fishermen leave enough fish for future seasons. Sustainability means different things to different people. A woman who's farmed for 5 generations tells me that sustainability is survivability, because if her farm doesn't survive, she won't either. A fisherman in New Orleans loses everything to Hurricane Katrina. His definition of sustainability: adaptability and resilience. Ann Rose lives on a North Carolina mountaintop without running water or electricity. For her, Sustainability means simply learning to do everything yourself. It's DIY. So sustainability has no single meaning. For a farmer, it might mean survivability. Or it could also mean the ability to adapt, even to do everything yourself. But in the end, sustainability really means taking responsibility. Not only for yourself, but for your community and the planet. And especially for those who come after.
Okay. So those are a couple of videos I thought might find interesting. There are so many others out there. They brought up some very interesting, important questions there about the way sustainability is hijacked by businesses and hello, come in.
Hi, Linda.
Perhaps we can come back during our discussion period, so I will go on.
Are you going?
Sustainable development, I'm going to a history, very brief history of a very long and very extensive part of our human past. That the human-dominated ecosystems, large-scale shifts of human living conditions from our early history, from bands, from tribes, families, to settled communities, nations, and empires, to look at our past. From hunter-gatherers to settled agriculture, starting about 8,000 to 10,000 years since the last ice age. And then we had developments of various human civilizations around the world. Some survived, others did not. So we have that part of our history. And the most important development in terms of the impact that it had on human history is the way that the economy developed during the past 250 years or so, what we call the Industrial Revolution. First started with the use of coal for energy production and how that changed. Hi Lee, come in.
Come in, Lee. Sit over here. Yeah, good.
And with the advent of modern technology, how far we have gone from fossil fuel, coal burn, to burning to electricity. That is the first industrial revolution, I'll call it. Then the second industrial revolution with the electricity, and the third one with the computers. And now we are transitioning to our fourth industrial revolution with the internet and synthetic biology. Now we can even edit human genome. With the extent technology has gone forward is mind-boggling in terms of artificial intelligence, how we can change the world, nanotechnology, and human gene editing technology. It's going to throw up tremendous ethical questions. Now we can change our genome, edit it, remove elements, and then insert it into an embryo, and then that can develop into a living thing, humans or animals and plants. So this is an uncharted territory. The scientists from around the world have developed this technology, and how to move forward. I can give a talk on that as part of my other interest in terms of technological development. But technology is the key here in that changing our world. So burning fossil fuels and clearing forests to the human-induced change of our environment and planet has been, it's incredible. We have been changing our environment to adapt to particular local conditions, to settle agriculture, to build homes against adverse environmental conditions and so on and so forth. But that was minimal compared to the way that we built large cities and highways and the way we designed our planet. So that is the change that is taking place. And some scientists are saying that this is going to create a human-created ecological condition. I mean, previously everything was conditioned by nature, planetary conditions, ice ages, and geological changes as a result of larger forces beyond us. But the Anthropocene, the stage that we are in now at the moment, is something that is created or changed by humans, that humans have changed the climate, our environment, our earth. So this is an extremely exciting field to study, and also a very important field to study. And do we have the knowledge to find out what will happen as a result of this tremendous changes that we have started during the past 150 years or so? And how should we take this forward? Are we going to be in control? And on top of the technologies that I mentioned here, that we can change the world. So this is a very interesting thing, that how we are breaching the planetary boundaries that I talked about earlier, and the Anthropocene that we have created as a result of having trillions of tons of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and that changing the oceans, ocean acidification, also changing the environmental conditions, and so on and so forth. And that will have impact on our planet. Though some scientists and some politicians all around the world say that all these things are just made up by some people, there is no climate change. I mean, there is climate change, but it's not caused by humans. Humans don't have a role in that. Of course, humans have a role, but there are other natural factors also have a role in that. But human role is much more significant. And can we think and see what we should do to reduce our imprint on the planet? And how we can do that sustainably is what sustainable development is all about. The thinking of sustainability science is all about. So that is this is what we call the emerging field of sustainability science. In essence, the changes that we have brought on this world, on this planet, during the past 10,000 years or so, but much more faster during the past 200 or 300 years. So this change that has taken place with the knowledge that we have, and the science advancement of science and technology, and advances in the economy and communication, and so on and so forth. And on top of that, all the human problems that we have in terms of our political fights, and the humans fighting to different religions and so on. So it's a much more complex world that we are living in. So sustainability science comes out of that. Can we take stock of the world and create the kind of policies that we can address these in a meaningful way? That is the emerging field of sustainability science, in which we are involved in. This is quite exciting to be. This is a newly emerging field where it's an interdisciplinary field. That means that various disciplines, from science, from medicine, from biology, from anthropology, sociology, economics, all these fields are important in this area. So sustainable development, as I said earlier, is concerned about the fundamental question of enhancing human well-being. Under these conditions, how can we improve our well-being of those people who are left out of this process of economic development I talked about? Hundreds of millions of people live in extreme luxury in the world, with all the things that they need. I mean, even though those people complain about things, but there are millions of people who don't have any of those things. So we need to think about the intergenerational equity in terms of intragenerational, that means between different groups, how they can also have this good life sustainably. So someone living in this country, you can see that tremendous disparity in terms of the quality of life of people. I don't need to belabor that point, everybody knows that. And then other parts of the world, this is the most richest country in the world, but America also has got problems. So how to address that is sustainably, is the question of sustainable development, sharing resources, addressing the questions of poverty and crime and all sort of other issues. So maintaining and improving the quality of life of all citizens of the globe, not just a privileged few within a healthy ecosystem, health system. So sustainability implies responsible and proactive decision making and innovation that minimizes negative impact and maintains balance between ecological resilience. We should think in terms of our ecosystems are resilient to a large extent. We need to think of that. They are resilient. Our planet is resilient. It will go on even after humans have disappeared. But we want to live in here so that we won't be victims of that, the planet taking over and then say, hey, you're like a nuisance. So it will go on. But we have to make sure that we adapt to the environment, not make the other way around. That is the hubris that we humans have, that we can make our planet behave the way we want. It won't. We have to find a way to adapt the conditions. Otherwise, we'll perish. So we need to think in terms of how to make that balance between ecological resilience, economic prosperity for all humanity, and cultural vibrancy. We need to think in that sense also, because one of the problems of globalization and economic growth is that many of those communities or vulnerable communities are changed tremendously in terms of losing their culture, losing their language, and losing their particular way of living and foods and so on and so forth. So we need to think that also in a much more diverse community where all of us could live in prosperity. So cultural vibrancy to ensure a desirable planet for all species, including not only just humans but also other living things now and in the future. So this is what we call the emerging field of sustainability science. So the focus is on enhancing well-being without compromising the very foundations of human environment systems. So we need to think in terms of we are part of the environment, we are part of the ecology. We have to think in terms of this human environment system that evolved. So it is all about constructing reliable and useful knowledge or for understanding of the integrated system that we are talking about of social institutions, our natural world, and the changes that we have brought to the Earth system. Okay? So we have to find out that knowledge, that reliable knowledge. So how to integrate that system of social institutions that we have created and the natural world and the changes that humans bring to the Earth system. So it encompasses, as I said earlier, natural sciences, social sciences, and human sciences. Natural sciences, whether it is biology, physics, chemistry, biological sciences, medical sciences, and social sciences, anthropology, economics, sociology, and human sciences, philosophy, and arts, and culture, language. So it's a complex mix, but we can find useful strands of wisdom from all these spheres. So it is a tremendously complex task for us to think of this field of sustainability science. For me, as a person with a diverse academic background, I find it quite interesting to find useful knowledge from various fields, but it is not that easy in terms of coming up with the integrated science. So fundamental to sustainability science is the simultaneous consideration of the environment, ecological conditions, and the social technological systems. We need to think in terms of how we can think of these things simultaneously. See, science looks at things as a subset and study that in isolation. That's the way science does it. It does that very well. In the laboratory conditions, you can simulate on computers now most of the things. You don't need that, whether it is climate system or even a growth of a cell or anything that you can do that. But in sustainability studies, we need to think in terms of how simultaneously these things change. So it's a dynamic field. So it is doable, but it is not that easy. So it's a major focus on understanding the complex dynamics I talked about of the interactions between humans and environment. So the key word here is dynamic, in terms of how one area affects the other, and how we can study that and understand, make sense of what's going on, whether it is the planetary boundaries, what are the various factors that are affecting this planetary boundary, the input that's going in there and the output. That's one way of thinking, what we call systems thinking. What are things going into the planet and what is coming out? So how that plays out, the dynamic interactions. So what are some of the central questions of sustainability science? How best can we advance our knowledge of the interdependence of human well-being in the natural environment? How are long-term trends in economic growth and environmental change reshaping nature-society interaction and interdependency? Some interesting questions that some of us can study further. What factors determine the limits of resilience of our ecosystem, our nature? And sources of vulnerability. What are those sources of vulnerability that can affect of our Earth system and also our social technological systems that we created, our industrial economy, for example, where we are dependent on electricity, which is produced somewhere else, and that is created, that electricity is produced by burning coal or oil or maybe from nuclear power plant, and how that affects where the coal is dug up or where the nuclear power plant is sited, and what happens to the nuclear waste and nuclear terrorism and all sorts of things. So that is the connection that we're talking about, social technological systems and the vulnerability of those systems. So what sort of global and local environmental knowledge governance are required? How we can, if at all possible, to govern the knowledge system, where it is the universities or other institutions. So these are some of the interesting questions that we can study in this field. Maybe a little bit complex for us, but I can go into the details now when I offer the course for sustainability science in detail. The methodology that we use for sustainability science, what sort of tools, methods of inquiry, theories and models are needed? We don't know any of these things. I'm just throwing out some questions. We need new methods to cross or span traditional disciplinary boundaries. How we can cross boundaries between, say, biology and economics, or from sociology and technology. How we can span that boundary to connect those boundaries that we have. So a systems approach I mentioned is an interesting way to look at it. Like learn from the limits to growth study that was conducted by several scientists at MIT. When computers developed, they plugged data from around the world about population, our use of resources, the amount of pollution that we create as a result. They plugged all these things into a computer, and it is called the limits to growth study. That came out in the 1970s. It was at the request of Club of Rome. That was a group of people, of politicians, scientists, and business people came together, called the Club of Rome, in the 1970s, and then they suggested this study. It was carried out by several scientists at MIT in the 1970s, and they came up with some recommendations, limits to growth study. The book is available, written by Meadows and et al. That's the name of the book. MEADOWS, Meadows. Limits to Growth book. And their suggestion was that they made some proclamations that we would run out of certain kinds of fuels by such and such date, and we would have to consume less, or we may have to switch resources and things like that. Some of the recommendations did not come true. They said that we would have population would grow so fast that we will run out of resources. It's some sort of neo-Malthusian sort of approach, but we haven't reached there yet. But the recommendations, the warnings that they gave were quite right, the limits to growth study. And then we did the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment that was carried out by United Nations University and several other scientific organizations. That became the basis for understanding the limits of our ecosystems, which is called the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. That our biodiversity is under threat, there are certain biological limits that we have. If we push beyond that, we will have tremendous problems. So this study became the basis for many of the further studies that we have conducted since then. So created certain tools. And then we also have something called Earth System Governance Project. That is also, United Nations is also part of that. The Earth System Project, United States is a big part of that project. The Earth System Governance Project. It's also University of Colorado Boulder as a center of that. You may want to go on the website and find out some very interesting studies be conducted by the Earth System Governance Group. So I have some knowledge of all these groups, so if you are interested, I can of course give you links or connections to people and institutions. So we need to have insights from complex systems theory, innovation system theory, cultural studies, political ecology, science and technology studies, among other interdisciplinary fields to make this interesting. So we need to have a new idea of ecological footprint to study this, study what is our ecological footprint in terms of our food consumption, our energy consumption, or the way we behave. So we can construct various indices for studying that. And again, the ecological footprint studies are available on the net. You can find out what methodologies they use to come up with various indexes. Sustainability science and education is a growing field. A number of universities from around the world teach and conduct research on sustainability-related problems and issues. As I mentioned, ASU has a School of Sustainability Studies, very well known. We are part of that group, American University of Southern Nations. For example, Daryl mentioned that yesterday we got approval from the Arizona board to offer a master's degree in sustainability science that I'll be leading, with 2 specializations: sustainability, peace and development. That looks at how sustainability is related to peace and security in the world, and also related to development. And another specialization will be science and technology for sustainability, how we can use our knowledge of science and technology for sustainability studies. So the 2 areas of specialization. You can look at our website and find out what are the core courses for each that students must take, and also the required courses for these 2 specializations, and the electives available. And also you have to write a 6-credit thesis for that, about 20,000 words, 32 credit hours. You need 32 credits to graduate. So you can find more details on that soon. So various challenges. As I mentioned, we need new conceptual frameworks. We need to pay greater attention to bridging modern knowledge with traditional knowledge. This is the second part of my talk. That I talked a lot about modern science and how we can learn from that to create sustainable the knowledge on sustainability. But there's a gap, and that's where we come in, AUSN. How we need to learn from traditional cultures and traditional communities where they have thousands of years of wisdom that they have had in terms of how they adapted living in harsh environmental conditions. Not only just natural resource constraints, but also in terms of how to manage their resources, their local knowledge and local traditions. And that is scattered around the world, and how we can tap into their wisdom and learn from them and adapt and integrate. So this is quite exciting for us to do. And that is what our comparative advantage is in terms of our university's location and also our connections. So bringing these two together. So we need to pay greater focus attention on the chain of knowing knowledge, the chain of knowledge, to learning, to doing, to create this. So let me look at some ways of differentiating, if you want, I want to use that word, the traditional knowledge versus scientific knowledge or modern knowledge. Traditional, we call it indigenous or native or rooted knowledge, rooted to native peoples, indigenous peoples around the world. And modern knowledge it doesn't talk in terms of particular territory, even though some people say it is Western knowledge. But it is non-territorial in some sense. They call it modern science. When science practice in China or United States is the same. They use the same methods, same theories. So it is more abstract or more global in scope, if you want to use that term. So that's the difference between scientific knowledge and traditional knowledge. It has got specific ownership in terms of whose knowledge it is. But modern knowledge, the ownership is, they say, all of humanity or the scientific community. Traditional knowledge is more in terms of sacredness of that. It's associated with rituals, associated with particular cultural traditions. It is more sacred. Scientific knowledge is more secular. It's not related to particular religious traditions, even though if we go back to modern science, you can say that it came out of natural philosophy and it came out of natural knowledge. But we don't think that as part of the tradition of modern science. It is more secular in its nature. Traditional knowledge is more oral and visual. More oral traditions, visual traditions. Visual is education through storytelling and parables through generations. It's not written down as or codified, if you want to use that. But scientific knowledge is more written and documented. So if you have to publish, you have to write books, you have to write equations to show what that knowledge is. And the method of teaching is more didactic, like what I'm doing, more lectures and things like that. More theories and laws, established laws. Traditional knowledge is learning by doing. That's how you practice, that's how you learn. But scientific knowledge is more analytical. Study a subset of the whole, take a part and study that. Or simulate a condition in a laboratory, take a specimen and study that. That's the way modern knowledge is, modern science practices. Traditional is more intuitive. That it comes out of certain intuitions. Well, scientists also say that intuition is an important part of more science. Scientific knowledge is more hypothetical, that you propose certain kinds of theories and test it. And then once that test verifies your hypothesis, then it becomes established theory and so on and so forth. And it's more model-based, modern scientific knowledge. Some people say traditional knowledge is more holistic. It is more in terms of looking at the community or a group of people. Scientific knowledge is more reductive. It is in terms of reducing to the minimal and then studying that. That's the way we look at scientific knowledge. Traditional knowledge, some people say it is more subjective. That everybody else may not be able to see what this person sees. It's more subjective or personal, as opposed to objective and more rational. That everybody can see what is Newton's law or say any other kinds of scientific laws. It's more rational, it's objective. Traditional knowledge is more experiential, to feelings, to experience. Scientific knowledge is more empirical. You collect data and some people say it's more positivist. It's a philosophical way of looking at it. This is in a gist in one slide. It's so complex that I can give you that in a nutshell. I thought that might be quite useful for you to contrast. Now, for the job for us is to bridge this, bring the useful knowledge from the traditional, and link that with the modern. That is what sustainability science is. The challenge is. And I can go on. This might be something that most of our listeners know what traditional knowledge is. Nevertheless, I'll spend a few minutes. Indigenous and native peoples everywhere are strongly attached to nature. It's kind of a cliche to say that, to Mother Earth. Attachment to nature, but this is in contrast to, say, modern science, where they say that we have detached ourselves. I mean, the primary way of looking at modern science is that we detach ourselves from and study as an observer, not be thinking as we are part of that. So that might be the problem with modern science, that we take ourselves out of it and then looking and studying. That may have lost us some certain values into that, in the way of the knowledge evolved. Nature as concrete reference point for their knowledge and wisdom, for native traditions. Everywhere you look at, nature is the baseline or the reference point. And their ethical and moral universe are deeply rooted to nature of all the traditional peoples. The customs, the duties, kinship, rituals, responsibilities, and so on are often based on or patterned after relationships in the natural world. So that is what the baseline of reality is for traditional people's knowledge. The baseline is nature, how they are part of that. Their stories, their myth, or their living things, and the stories are based on nature. That's what the bottom line is, or the baseline is. For example, the Native American tradition, I'm sure our friends here from who members of such glorious tradition can add more to this. One is drawn into the rich moral relationships among humans, plants, animals, and biophysical forces embedded in their historical memory, or what we call the oral history. According to Joseph Brown, famous book, Teaching Spirits. I'm taking a few points from his fantastic book. There is a deep respect and relatedness to natural forces with plants and animals, something we call the mythic reality. So the environmental ethics and knowledge that is coming out of that tradition is deeply embedded in community rituals. Community rituals are a very important part of the knowledge that came out of that tradition, and then of course the larger context is that community is part of nature. They are not apart from nature, they are part of nature. So the ethics, the worldviews coming out of, so there is a deep respect for nature, earth. Why we need to respect our plants, our soil, our rocks, our mountains, and our rivers, our water, our air. So that is so important. So that the ethics is inextricably linked to that. You can't think outside of that tradition, that way of looking at the world. And the presentations coming later will tell more about that. So there is this horizontal appearances that we have of what we see, and which must be intercepted by the vertical reality of world of reality, where all things are united in a sacred order. So the horizontal world of various things that we have, and then the sacredness of where how they relate to that from a vertical point of view of their spiritual world, or their how to relate ourselves to the larger universe in terms of thinking where we are, how we are connected to that. So animals, plants, and plants communicate the sacred order of the landscapes. So deciphering this order is what knowledge is all about. How animals communicate, how plants communicate, how they live together, and how they are part of this landscape. So how to decipher, understand that. That's how that knowledge is created. So in most indigenous communities, this sacred order is deeply embedded in their physical adaptation to the environment, how they adapted to that environment, and manifests in their daily activities, be it hunting, gathering, fishing, or farming. And this is what we call the traditional ecological knowledge that came out of that. Various communities have this knowledge, and how that knowledge is being used now to forestry management, or preserving our natural resources, whether it is fisheries, or whether how important these ecological conditions are in terms of purifying water, how it purifies the air. So that is what we call traditional ecological knowledge. So traditional cultures have a deep repository of knowledge related to biodiversity. They know when there is a problem that is caused by whether it is environmental conditions, overexploitation of resources, or whether it is related to some diseases, or whether it is related to some other problems. They know what is threatening the biodiversity, or ecosystems, or healing practices, so climate change, for example, and natural resource management. So we have this tremendous resources available out there, so which could be used with their permission. That knowledge could be used for ecological restoration. Those ecosystems that are destroyed by modern industries, we can learn from that for ecological restoration. So ecosystems, ecology people now going to these communities and learning from them, and integrating that with modern science, that how we can put these things together for ecological restoration or preservation of biodiversity, whether it is preserving seeds or plants, or climate adaptation, climate change adaptation, I mean, how we can adapt to these harsh conditions as a result of our own fault, how we can adapt to that, or environmental protection in general. So, conclusion, sustainability science has much to learn from traditional knowledge and wisdom. Sustainability science based on modern science and technology alone is incomplete. So, we need to select knowledge from both traditions, select and integrate the best knowledge from both systems. So, which is an excellent research question for AUSN students. So, here I will stop. Okay. So how we can integrate, how we can bring these two knowledge traditions and cross-fertilize, to use an ecosystem term, to create sustainability science. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Govindan. Does anyone have any questions, comments? And welcome to Lee and Linda.
I went a bit quick, but I can break it down into simpler explanations if you would like. But ask anything. Somebody's calling.
Oh, I missed a number. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Yeah, those of our colleagues on Skype, you have any question? Very late. Yeah, please go ahead. I could barely hear you. Yeah, can you repeat that question? Uh-huh. Yes, yeah.
And you have shown that scientific knowledge is analytical,
Uh-huh.
starting something.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
It is objective and rational.
Yeah.
And but it is reductive. What is
Reductive, I mean, it isn't it, I meant in terms of we can, in many instances, we think reductive in terms of, what? It's more analytical, it's more synthesized. It, apart from the context within which it evolves. That's what I meant by reductive. I need to think more in terms of that word. More, we say more in terms of deduce from inferences, deductive. Maybe that's what I meant, probably, not reductive. If you deduce knowledge from inferences, like looking at the world, how, for example, Darwin came up with the idea of evolution by looking at the conditions around how certain organisms adapted to their environmental conditions, and from there he came up with the theory that maybe that they are adapting to particular constraints that they have, or conditions that were created by changes as a result of environment or natural forces. So reductive, let me come back to that in a moment. Maybe I might be able to say more about it, but do you have anything to say about it? Hello?
No, I think we lost. I'm done.
I'll just, for the benefit of the people in the room, I'll show our Skype faces, so at least you can see, and then we'll switch it over to Leanne, but at least we have a lot more people have been introduced at the beginning.
When I think of reductive
Yeah.
science, I always think of like modern medicine, like how like a doctor looks at like your kidney. They don't look at your whole family or your environment. They're just looking at the diseased kidney.
That's what I meant by synthesize. I mean, look at it in a very narrow context.
That's how I always think of
Yeah, I think that's
reductive.
what it is meant,
Yeah.
Rather than looking at the larger picture.
You look at one piece.
Yeah, piece by piece, yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, any other comments or questions from you? And we had a few questions. Arif said colonization is still fully fledged. The United Nations was created by colonizers to better control the colonized nations. What do you have to say about that? Leanne agrees.
The United Nations was created by the colonizers to better control the colonizers. Well, I mean, there may be elements of truth to that, of course. We still have, within independent countries, sovereign nations, states, groups which are still suffering or under control or don't have the full rights. Yes, of course, we have those problems. Particularly indigenous communities around the world are victims of that. Yes, in that sense, yes, I would agree with you.
Okay, and Raquel had a question answered by yours. Anke from Uganda would like to know how the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals were designed.
All right. It's a long process. We were part of that with Rio Plus 20, where these proposals came up first. It was a long consultative process that the United Nations spent more than 3 years or so. And the 17 goals and 169 sub-goals, so unwieldy. I have the slides. And finally lost what we were all talking about. How that is possible. It is possible to have 17 major goals to be attained by 2030. Elimination of poverty around the world, which is meant in terms of certain amount of money that one would have to maintain a decent life. That potable water, drinking water for everyone, sanitation. Now, more than 500 million people still defecate out in the open. They don't have toilets, for example, major problem. And that is one of the goals. And reducing inequality, because one of the things that we have noticed recently is that income gap between the rich and the poor has gone up tremendously, income inequality. And also inequality in terms of other factors, whether inequality, geographical inequality, inequality between genders or between different groups. So that is one of the goals. And reducing maternal mortality, infant mortality, and so many other goals are there in the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So I can give a lecture on that. So how they were designed, again, with a lot of compromises between nations. The United Nations, as you know, is made up of countries of the world, and each country has got its own right to propose certain things and oppose certain things, so it has to be based on consensus. And this process is rather cumbersome and rather difficult. We know what happened at the climate change conferences, where some countries even don't want even the term sustainable development. They think that sustainable development means it's against oil industry or it's against certain kinds of other industries. They oppose. So it's a matter of compromise. That's a problem with the United Nations. Nevertheless, they came up with this goal of 17 goals. The Millennium Development Goal that the United Nations came up in 2000 had 8 goals, and that's supposed to reach the result by 2015. Again, the idea was to reduce poverty by 50%. That's based on the dollar a day, which was increased in $1.25. That is the minimum amount that a person should have to maintain a decent life. But again, we know that that is not enough. Based on purchasing power parity, that's what they use the term. In certain countries, $1.25 might be enough to buy a certain amount of food, but can you have shelter, housing, healthcare, and all sort of things? That is the question. So some countries reached those goals, reducing poverty by 50%. China, for example, reached that goal because of China's tremendous growth. Some other countries did, others did not. And certain other maternal mortality rate has been declining in some parts of the world, but it increased in other parts as a result of conflicts, civil wars and internal conflicts, migration, forced migration of people. And infant mortality decreased in many parts of the world where there was stability, where there were better health care, education for women, and empowerment of women. Mortality rate decreased, but in other parts of the world it decreased because of conflicts. So that goal also was not met completely. So in 2015, the United Nations came up with this new goals called 17 Sustainable Development Goals with 169 or sub-goals under each of those. You can go on to UN website and get the details of that. The consultative process was very long and tortuous. There were many committees set up by the Secretary General that sought advice from heads of government, scientists, and a host of thinkers and activists. So that is for another occasion. I will give a talk on that, on sustainable development goals. Okay.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
No, the one thing that's dawned on me that whenever we're talking about sustainability of whatever it may be, whether it be our environment, our faith, our traditions, whatever it may be, in a world manner, we all look at it individually as how it affects us. Each individual is concerned with what is best for him, that the people want. Every culture is concerned with what is best for that culture.
Exactly.
Everybody on the planet is concerned with what's best here now that we've discovered one more planet in our system. And that's always going to be a challenge. You can't just change that concept because we are separate individual human beings. We're always going to be concerned about how this affects us.
That's a very well taken point, Lee. This is where values and how we need to think beyond us. I mean, in order for us to survive and have a better living conditions, we need other people also to cooperate in that process. Otherwise, we won't have that.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what sustainability thinking is about. How we can have our own self-interest, but in order for us to have that, we need to have the cooperation with others. We can't live alone and thinking that, oh, I don't care about things. I don't think you will be able to survive for more than a few days. So we are interdependent in many ways, whether we get our electricity, whether our security. So there's a limit to that thinking, that even the inherently humans think that way. We think of ourselves first. Our cultures think that way, nations think that way. But we have found out the mistake or the problems as a result of that. So how to make an accommodation that we have to think that we share this planet, we share our resources. So so there is this concept called tragedy of the commons, that if you overuse, or if you think that we can go on graze our cows or our animals on a limited pasture, we will sooner or later run out of resources. So we understand the problem.
Yeah. Well, and we always will have the challenge of whatever our governmental agencies may be.
Yeah.
There'll always be a challenge, whether it be local, whether it be state, whether it be federal,
Yeah.
for in every country in the world, is the fact that you're being governed in some sense, whether it's traditional or whether it is new laws or issues that are brought up. And that's always going to be a challenge for sustainability. Everybody wants to be in first place if they can be,
Yeah.
and be in control.
So that's a well taken point. That's why we talk in terms of sustainability and values, how we need to think in a larger context, that we share this planet or we share this community, that we have to think in terms of our own well-being, our own conditions. We need to have the cooperation or support of others in the community. But we don't always do that. People exploit. Will think of themselves first. And not all of us are like that. I mean, of course, in any community, there are people who are, in the distribution, in the extremes. We have to live with that. How to find solutions to that. That's part of human nature. We can't change that.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
Okay, and so maybe the last question I have is from Riddhi from India. Riddhi said it's noisy. Do you want to try talking, Riddhi? And if it's noisy, I can read it.
Go ahead, Riddhi. Hello? Are you there?
Riddhi, do you want to try talking, or you think it's too noisy?
You can type your question though.
She has typed. So, okay. So the question is what's the implication of studying the definition of sustainability for indigenous people or people of rural regions who just believe in practicing methods and not in defining things so much academically?
Actually, this is a very interesting question because traditional peoples are practicing sustainable development. They know how to survive and how to share resources. So nobody needs to preach traditional communities how to live sustainably. They are living sustainably. It is the other way around. Those who live in cities or those who are detached from that need to learn from those communities. So that is my point. It's never the other way around. That we have to learn from traditional communities how they practice sustainability and sustainable living under tremendous conditions, adverse conditions. And that is the challenge, how to support that and then expand that further to the larger community.
Okay, so thank you very much, Govindan. I'd like to pass it over to Leanne. The PowerPoint is here. It was too large to send by to most of the people. And this is actually, we've had 8 master's graduates defend a thesis in the Philippines and in Japan. But this is the first defense in home office in AUSN, and she's the first Native American bioethics graduate, I think. Leanne, thank you very much. And she's got some materials on oak plant. She's going to talk, and for some of the students, they know about oak plant. Leanne has talked before, but this is the results of her busy writing her thesis and a year or so. Thank you, Leanne.
Do I just hold it?
You just hold the mic, yeah, to help other people on Skype. We have about 25 on Skype.
Well, first, I always want to begin by acknowledging that we are on Sikene, on Autumn, the Pima land, and I think that's really important for a lot of our newcomers to understand as well. Is that when you're raised Apache, you always give respect when you go to a new community, to a new area, to the people that are from there and the land that you're on. And the land that is here, you're on the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community. And that's the Autumn land. And Autumn is the people. As it is in many indigenous languages, when you say the language, it means the people. But in this community is rather unique because you have 2 tribes. You have the Autumn and you have the Pipash, which are the Pima and the Maricopas, and they do live here together. So I always want to acknowledge that and just give that respect to the people that live here. Tagodashi Lian Davignon Gonze, San Carlos Gonliu. San Carlos is where I was raised.